Welcome to the Asheville City Council meeting. If you could just take a moment and mute your cell phones. If you want to speak on tonight's agenda, please sign up. There's a sign-up table up front that'll keep on going during the meeting. So if you're suddenly decided you want to talk about something that you didn't already sign up for, you can run out there and sign up for that, and we'll constantly get the sheets up here for me to be able to call on folks who sign up to speak. We're going to first rise and do the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I need a motion to allow Councilwoman Roney to participate remotely.
This is Sage. I'll move.
We can see Councilwoman Roney on the screen right here, but you can't, and you'll be able to hear her. So go ahead, please, Sage.
This is Sage. I'll move.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. And Maggie, you said you gave me, we got to do a roll call vote for our votes tonight because we have one person attending remotely. That is the process. So I'm going to call the vote and try to rotate through this. Vice Mayor Smith?
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler?
Aye.
Councilwoman Brony?
Does she vote for it?
Yeah.
Aye.
Yep. Councilwoman Mosley?
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner?
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore?
Aye.
And myself, aye. Okay. All right, moving on to the consent agenda. Are there questions, comments, or a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
This is Sage. I'll move to adopt the consent agenda.
This is Sandra. Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. We don't have anyone signed up to speak under the consent agenda, so I will call the vote. Councilwoman Whistler?
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney?
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley?
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner?
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Vice Mayor Smith?
Aye.
All right, we've adopted the consent agenda. Okay, under presentations and reports, we're going to hear from Sasha Vertinsky for item A, which is 221 Long Shoals Road. We have items 1 and 2. We'll hear the presentation for both and take public comment for both, and then we will vote on those items separately.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of council, members of the public. I am Sasha Vertinsky, Affordable Housing Officer for the Community and Economic Development Department. It's nice to see you in chambers here. And I'm here to present Land Use Incentive Grant for 221 Long Shoals. As many of you know, this is a CZ. That's your next item as well. This project is in South Asheville. It's committing 20% of their units to be affordable. It's up to 37 units. For folks at 80% AMI and below.
There we go.
Okay,
back.
thank you. Because I can see it. The project's also bringing some other benefits, including rental assistance, housing for the homeless by name list, solar panels, and universal design. And under our point system, it qualifies for 17 years of taxes paid. So this project consists of 186 units, and you'll hear me say up to, because I talked with the developer since our committee meetings, and basically they're saying that's their max. That could be a little bit less, but they would provide 20% of units. So it's just kind of a caveat there, so we're all on the same page. Housing represents 100% of all the rental square footage. So 37 of the rental apartments, 20% would be affordable, serving individuals and families earning at or below 80% of the area median income for a minimum of 20 years. And the project's on 5.36 acres of land, And the affordability mix that they are proposing at this time is 18 one-bedroom units and 19 studio units. And half of the affordable units accept vouchers, and those would be the one-bedroom units and one studio. So here's the project location. It is on the north shore of Lake Julian in South Asheville, very close to Irby Brinson Park. And Ingalls is just to the west here, and Biltmore Town Center is very close as well. So, and here's some exterior elevations. So for the points summary, they get 20 points off the bat for affordability, an additional 10 points for rental assistance, which is half of all the units, half of the affordable, but also 10% of all the units except vouchers. 5 points for housing a person on the homeless by name list, 10 points for their location, 20 points for energy efficiency and solar panels, 10 points for universal design, and 10 points for building in a non-qualified census tract. So that's a total of 85 points or 17 years of taxes paid. So I'll just talk a little bit about vouchers in case folks don't know. 50% of the affordable units must accept housing choice vouchers. And those vouchers really help folks, for the most part, at 50% AMI and below. There's other kinds of vouchers. There's veterans, VASH, veterans vouchers, there's HOPWA, there's several different kinds. But generally, these folks are at 50% AMI and below. So they pay 30% of their income, and the voucher makes up the difference. Our area currently has about 100 vouchers that are going unused every month. We get monthly updates from the Housing Authority, for the most part because there's a lack of units that accept them. So people have them, they're looking for housing, and they can't find a unit. So when someone finds a unit, they leave public housing, and it opens up another unit behind them. So we're really helping 2 households at once. So the specifics for these land use incentive grant, there are 3 parcels. Currently, they have a tax value of about $3.3 million. They're paying annual taxes of $13,579, and they will continue to pay that throughout the entire program period. So under their estimated tax value of $26 million, the annual city property tax would be approximately $104,000, and the difference, $91,000, is what we would pay back during those 17 years. So the total grant, when you multiply that, you do the math, 91,000 times 17, we get to 1.5 million approximately. So then, taking that grant, and we divide it by the number of units, that's about $42,000 per unit, which is lower than our, overall cap that we're looking at $80,000. And after 17 years is up, we will start receiving the full tax value, although the affordability period is still 20 years. So this project has gone to the Housing and Community Development Committee, and they reviewed that request. And the Finance Committee, both committees voted 3-0 in favor. And I believe at both committees, there were comments about the unit mix and concerns about wanting to have more bedrooms. And that, especially given the location, it's across the street from, we've got 4 different schools right there: elementary, intermediate, middle, and high school. AHAC, the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, I gave them an update, and they also made similar comments to the other committees as well. So, and I did discuss these requests with the developer, and I will let them update you on that and talk about their situation with that. So overall, staff is still recommending approval of this Louise request. And I'm happy to take any questions, and the developer and their attorney is here as well.
Thank you, Sasha. Just one comment. I was doing this math quickly with the 91,361 per year and 37 units. It's like $200 a month in reduced rent, which I thought was an interesting way to say it that we don't normally have a bullet point for. But yeah, it's $200 a month subsidy per unit.
But the rent differential is more than that for the affordable unit. Actually,
Right.
I asked the applicant about what the difference would be between the market rate and the affordable, and it's
Significant.
Well, I can't recall the exact number. I think it was $400 or $500
Per unit.
per unit, right? So So our level of subsidy per unit, they add to that number.
And I think I've asked this before, but I would ask staff to consider talking about this idea of, we say 37 units at 80% AMI, but then 19 of those would accept housing choice vouchers. So I think we should restate that to basically say there's going to be 10% of them that are at 80% AMI and 10% of them that are going to be 50% AMI, because that's pretty much what the housing choice vouchers do.
Right, so the
Right, so-
language is accepting the vouchers, right? So it's not
Right.
guaranteeing you that that's who's going to be there.
Right,
So
but
I guess,
I-
just to be clear.
Right. And maybe, you could say accepts that, which is generally 50%. It's just, I think that people don't fully grasp how important it is when folks will accept vouchers, that who that is affecting. And, that's a pretty big difference between 80 and 50%.
Right.
So just.
Yeah, do you have
kinda-
that slide? That slide is really great, the one you were talking about with the 50%. It's just really helpful. I appreciate the effort because there is some additional, and to Gwen's point, there is some extra information. It could even be more. But it's really helpful to see this. We don't always share it that way. And the helping two households. Yeah. Thank you. Great explanation.
So you want to go ahead and do the zoning? I mean, was that all in one? Or is there any further pieces for the zoning piece of it?
That's it for me. I don't know if you want to hear from the developer about both things at once or how you want to, that's up to you all, I suppose.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're complete on both parts of this piece from staff.
Do you want me to?
Yeah, we have
It's
to do
Will.
two
Yeah,
votes.
We're looking for Will, maybe.
Is this yours or is this theirs?
Here he comes.
Ah,
He has entered.
okay, that's what's all right. Good stall there. You just looked blankly. Well, okay. Will Pompous with the dramatic entrance. Here he is, folks. Okay.
Still calm.
Will's like, I don't know what's
Speaker's
going on, but whatever it is.
Speaker's kind of low out there. I couldn't really,
Okay.
didn't catch my cue, sorry.
The drum roll.
That's right. no.
Now
Yeah,
it's
that's
so
good.
comfortable.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of council. Will Palmquist with Planning and Urban Design. I'll be presenting the conditional zoning petition for this project at 221 Long Shoals. So here is the map of the existing zoning on the left, Community Business 2, and the residential expansion conditional zone, proposed rezoning for those three properties, given that it's a conditional zoning due to the size of the project being over 50 residential units. This aerial imagery shows the site in a little more detail. You can see it fronts on Long Shoals Road, backs up onto Lake Julian. To the south and the west is a bank. It's across the street from existing multifamily and the school. And also to the east is a currently under construction Julian Woods retirement community. The future land use as designated in the Living Asheville Comprehensive Plan is urban corridor. No change in that designation is required. And then the details of the project, you can see here the site plan on the left with the three buildings in dark gray. They're 4 to 5 stories, kind of built into the slope as it slopes towards the lake. 186 dwelling units total. There will be 2 points of access. One is a new driveway across from the entrance to the school, and then another access point that will be off of a shared driveway with the Julian Woods retirement community. 282 parking spaces total are proposed. 10-foot wide sidewalk with a 5-foot wide planting strip is proposed along Long Shoals Road, and that'll match what's being proposed to the north and the east at Julian Woods. And then 5-foot wide internal sidewalks are proposed. Other standards such as landscaping, open space, and tree canopy preservation apply as well. And just some renderings of the property. You can kind of see how the three buildings are situated and kind of slope towards Lake Julian. So as mentioned earlier, 37 units will be designated affordable at 80% AMI for a minimum of 20 years. 19 will accept housing choice vouchers. The project is seeking a few technical modifications through the conditional zoning process. The first is a reduction in the overall open space area from the required 93,000 square feet to 65,600 square feet. The second is that 5-foot wide sidewalks will be installed internal to the site as opposed to the required 10-foot wide standard. And that no bike lane will be installed into the development or through it, given that there's no bike infrastructure on Long Shoals Road currently. The project is consistent with future land use designation of urban corridor by providing redevelopment in the form of residential uses that place an emphasis on pedestrian-friendly amenities and infrastructure. And the project supports a number of goals in the plan, such as providing infill development in a targeted growth area, increasing the supply of affordable housing in proximity to schools, transit, and parks, and providing access to natural areas and programmed open spaces. The project was approved with conditions at the May 19th Technical Review Committee and was also approved unanimously at the July 6th Planning and Zoning Commission. Therefore, staff concurs with the Planning and Zoning Commission and recommends approval of the proposed conditional zoning. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions? Okay. We don't have anyone signed up to speak under this item unless there's been any. Okay.
I'm happy to make a motion for Luigi, if we're ready.
Before we make a motion, may I say a couple of things?
Yes, please.
So this location, I'm just going to name location affordability for those with limited or no access to a personal vehicle. This location is 1/10 of a mile from the S6 transit route, with the last trip leaving in the 9 o'clock hour and serving this location every 90 minutes. So this is another example of our need to expand evening service hours and South Asheville frequency. I also hope in the future we could look at revisiting our land use incentive grant. For those listening, this is the LEAGE process, to ensure that 100% of the units that we're subsidizing are accepting vouchers.
I want to make sure I heard that right. So the frequency was every 90 minutes for a bus, is that what I heard? But it was part of our long-term planning to
That's
expand,
correct, for the
but we haven't been able
S6
to.
route.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Kim.
Okay, any other questions or comments before we have a motion?
I'll move to approve a land use incentive grant for Millstone Ventures LLC for development at 221 Long Shoals Road.
I'll second. It's Gwen.
All right, we have a motion and a second. And we'll do a roll call vote. I'll start with Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Myself, aye. Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
Okay. And then the next motion, I think there's a piece of paper there because it.
No, this is.
No, this is a
some
separate
things-
one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I've got it here.
So
Can you?
Got my briefing confused.
I'll make a motion to approve the conditional zoning request for the properties located at 221, 217, and 99999 Long Shoals Road from community business to residential expansion conditional zone, and find that the request is reasonable, is in the public interest, is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, and meets the development needs of the community. In that the request, 1, provides infill development in targeted growth areas, 2, increases the supply of affordable housing in proximity to schools, transit, and parks, and 3, provides access to natural areas and programmed open spaces.
All right, we have a motion and a second. I'll do a roll call vote. Councilwoman Mosley. Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Myself, aye. Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Okay, that completes item A 1 and 2. So if you were here for that, and this is your time to flee. For item B, we need a motion to continue this item to August 23rd. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Did you get it? Okay, I'm going to do a roll call vote. Councilwoman Turner,
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore. Aye. Myself, aye. Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley. Okay, and I started with Turner, right? All right. The next item is a public hearing to consider closing an unopened right-of-way west of Pearl Street between Patton Avenue and Hilliard Avenue, and Jessica Morris is going to talk to us about this one.
Good evening, Council. Jessica Morris, Assistant Director of the Transportation Department. This is a closure request for an unopened right-of-way that is west of Pearl Street between Patton Avenue and Hilliard Avenue. Delray Ventures has petitioned for this closure, and it is associated with the previously approved Avery project. There was another unopened right-of-way that was closed as part of this project, and that was rear Klingman Avenue, and the City Council approved that closure on April 26. Originally, staff and the applicant did not believe that this particular right-of-way was necessary to be closed, but since then, it has been determined and requested by NCDEQ that the right-of-way be closed because they are providing brownfield remediation funding for the overall Avery project. This is a view of the project site. The green line is the rear Klingman Avenue right-of-way that was previously closed, and the yellow shows the right-of-way that is being proposed to be closed this evening. Here is a site plan of the Avery project, and the red hashed areas are the right-of-ways proposed to be closed. The Technical Review Committee did not go back and specifically review this request. However, the overall project had been reviewed by TRC multiple times. There is an MSD sewer line that exists within this right-of-way, therefore an easement will remain in place and no structures will be built within it. And DSD and transportation staff see no issues with the requested closure. The Multimodal Transportation Commission did review the request on June 22nd at their meeting and unanimously recommended approval. So the proposed motion for you this evening is to adopt a resolution to permanently close an unopened right-of-way west of Pearl Street between Patton Avenue and Hilliard Avenue associated with the Avery project.
Questions?
No questions.
Make a motion.
Good.
I'll make a motion to adopt a resolution to permanently close an unopened right-of-way west of Pearl Street between Patton Avenue and Hilliard Avenue associated with the Avery project.
And I'll second. This is Sandra.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and we don't have anyone signed up to speak under this item. I'm going to start with Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Myself, aye. Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Okay. That dispenses with item C on the public hearings agenda. Moving on to public hearing item D, a public hearing relative to amending the Unified Development Ordinance to update open space requirements and related amendments. And Vidila Topika is also making a dramatic entrance for us. Todd, you want to just like sing us a tune? Okay.
We are moving
We will
quickly.
sit in awkward silence.
We're moving
We
quickly.
were moving at lightning speed, but now we are not going to move at lightning speed. because We have several speakers on this.
When kicking us off, I don't want to ruin his mojo.
Yeah,
Right.
right. You don't want to be the warm-up act?
I don't know,
I
this
hope he doesn't
sucks.
like fall on the stairs or anything.
This sucks. That's good.
Yeah, pretty good. Maybe we could get camera guy. Are you hot or cold?
A little
Hot, are we hotter? I'm feeling hotter. It's definitely humid in here.
Yeah.
We could have tropical plants in this place if we had sunlight.
We might need water help.
Maggie, can we do the? Yeah. Maybe just point or two
Just
when
won't turn or open.
what are you doing over there with the water?
We're
I
trying
was
to
gonna
get
say, I'm a little worried about the water. Don't
We're
trust.
trying, but I would almost destroy the computer.
Oh, they can't get the,
There we go.
okay, here's Videla. Well, hold on, we're trying to get these water pitchers.
Oh my God, I can't. We might need some strengths. Maybe end of, look at,
Hey Maggie, these water pitchers are stuck.
end of looking sharp.
Hi.
Okay, we're ready for you.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, members of council, city staff, members of the public. We've been working on this ordinance for about 3 years, and we're happy to be here tonight and to talk about this important ordinance and the community conversation that's been going around. I'll go through first some key takeaways to just get you situated. This is a proposed zoning text amendment to the Unified Development Ordinance to what we're saying here is mostly private open space zoning regulations. In some cases, the city develops property, and so in those cases, they would be public projects. But for the most part, this is about private development. The draft regulations seek to balance city goals related to housing and the environment. So the proposed benefits include significantly removing barriers to infill housing and improving the quality and accessibility of open spaces, which we don't really have in our current open space language. And finally, the open space ordinance, it complements the tree canopy efforts, and I'll talk about how that happens. So what is open space? This is the definition from our code, and we're not proposing to change this. Open space means an area that is intended to provide light and air and is designed for either environmental, scenic, or recreational purposes. Open spaces may include, but is not limited to lawns, decorative planting, walkways, active and passive recreation areas, playgrounds, fountains, swimming pools, wooded areas, and water courses. And then we say that they shall not be included for driveways, parking lots, and other surfaces for vehicular use. So I just want to be clear that open spaces can be wooded, they can be grass, they can be a hardscape of urban plaza. We want to provide the variability to allow design flexibility. A little bit about the process. As I mentioned, we started in 2019. Moving through 2020, we realized there was some community concern about this, so we slowed down and were encouraged to create a task force. We created this task force of members from these different boards and commissions that you can see here: the Riverfront Commission, Affordable Housing Advisory Commission, Developers Group, Downtown Commission, the Neighborhood Advisory Committee, Planning and Zoning, Sustainability, and the Urban Forestry Group. So it was very much diverse, and we used a consensus-based decision-making process. Every decision we came to with full consensus. It made for a lot more work, but we came to some better results. So what are the goals that we're trying to achieve? We want to implement the comprehensive plan strategies related to more housing. This is a significant problem with the current ordinance, and we'll talk about how open space undermines housing in Asheville. We want to improve the quality and accessibility of open spaces. Today, they're not very accessible. You can place them on a very sloped piece of property that very few people will be able to get to. We want to simplify and clarify the regulations so that city staff and the public can better understand how these rules work and how they can be applied. We have a creative solution here to better incentivize stormwater management, which we developed in partnership with the Stormwater Task Force. And we have some specific changes to the River Arts District Code to make the open space regulations more protective of the RAD. One concern that we hear a lot about is this concern that open spaces are going to really affect city property. And we want to be clear that city parks and open space zoning are two separate things. The city is investing a lot of money in the parks. They have $600,000 a year for deferred maintenance, which is about $10,000 per park. Not tons of money, but it's something. And they've been going through a $17 million bond referendum for parks over the last 5 years with 1 year remaining. So we're trying to improve our parks, but this open space zoning is primarily about private development. And here are some examples of what those spaces look like in the community if you go around. Playgrounds in areas with residential development or commercial along rivers. You might see seating near the rivers. Behind development, there may be wetland that's incorporated with grass. And then these more urban type layouts with courtyards or outdoor dining. And again, what you can see here is that in some cases, it's just about the grass and the hardscape, that trees aren't required. But we love trees and we want trees. And so I want to just focus and be very clear because there's been some confusion in the community that this is somehow undermining our tree policy. Trees are not required in open spaces, but we do have places where we require trees and encourage them. So this slide just says, what are we doing to protect and encourage trees in our city? In 2019, we conducted a tree canopy study, and we found out that over the last 10 years, we've lost 6% of our canopy, which is over 890 acres. Shortly after that, and through that, we developed the Tree Canopy Preservation Ordinance. That was established at the end of 2020, and basically what it requires is that every commercial property that's applicable to it must provide between 5 and 30% of tree canopy. It's a mixture of preservation, or you can cut it all down and have to replant it, and it depends on where you are in the city and what the type of land use is, but it's a pretty significant improvement that we've made very recently. And in addition, we have landscaping standards for all commercial development that requires parcels to plant trees and landscaping shrubs. Street trees, planting buffers. We have shrubs to block planting areas, trees within parking areas. So a significant number of trees through those two mechanisms, but not required in open space. It can work together if you want to put trees in open spaces, but it's not required. So which properties are required to provide open space? You saw this in the working session. If you're residential, it's 8 or more homes, which can be standalone homes, or it can be one building with 8 homes in it, one small apartment building. That's a trigger. Another is for commercial projects in most zoning districts. This chart provides an overview of the current situation with open space and the proposed, so I'll kind of walk through these relatively quickly. I think you've all seen this, but the public hasn't maybe. So for residential on the left, which is homes or lots, the current regulation is that you must provide 500 square feet per unit of housing or 15% of your parcel, whichever is greater. So about 15%. On the proposed side, you see that we vary today, what we're proposing, between 5 and 10% on the smaller side. The thinking is that for smaller sites, we need to be more flexible because it's hard to fit everything in. And then for larger sites where there's more room, allowing for more open space. The real problem here is this language that says 500 square feet per unit, whichever is greater, which leads to incredible numbers of open space. In subdivisions, we're suggesting that we reduce the open space a little bit. Some of this thinking is that if you have a home with a front yard and a backyard, maybe open space isn't that necessary. And so we're suggesting that we bring that down a little bit. For commercial property, likewise, we're suggesting that it come down a little bit because for most commercial property, it's maybe arguable that open space isn't as required. If you have a laundry business, do you really need a seating area for people to socialize outside? We think it's important because if you're employing people, they might want to go outside and have their lunch outside someplace rather than in the parking lot. So that makes sense. For stormwater, current regulations don't require managed stormwater mitigation for infill projects. We're suggesting that for large sites, it should be incentivized. There is no relationship to affordable housing with the current ordinance, and we're proposing that large sites would have a less restrictive open space standard. The fee in lieu, which is paying for properties that choose, instead of providing the open space, to pay for it, is going to stay the same. And it's only allowed for smaller projects because we think it's important that larger projects that have the space should provide the open space. And 2 changes proposed for the River Arts District in what's called the open space and public facilities part of the code. We're suggesting that the maximum building coverage is reduced, which is to say that buildings can't be as large, and that there's more of an impervious surface reduction. That was a lot. Thank you for being patient. So let's look at residential development. This chart compares Asheville with other cities. On the far left, you see the percent of open space required. And on the bottom, you see different colors for the cities that we're looking at. The blue is the lower end of their typical thresholds, and the red is the high. And what you see that's very clear is that Asheville's high is incredibly high. This is why, for 25 years, this ordinance has been putting significant downward pressure on housing in Asheville. And very few people have been talking about open space in that regard. I want to call out a recent book from the architect who founded this term, the missing middle housing, which he just highlights that open space zoning in most cities is a remnant of suburban development. And if we want to move in a direction where we have more walkable communities and homes closer together with soft density, we're not talking about towers, but the type of housing that looks like Montford, where there's mix of development and it's walkable and is 2 to 3 or 4 stories, that they're suggesting that we get rid of open space standards. We're not going that far. We think it has a role. We're just we think it needs to be more in balance. So a few examples. This is a building that we actually lived in when my son was 1, when we were working on our home. And you can see it's a 1920s building of 3 stories and 20 units. It has nice room for trees in the front and around the sides. Let's look at what would be required if we applied if this building wanted to be built today and would have to meet our current standards. Under the current requirement, they would only be able to build 3 units on this property. So just to have that amount of open space, this 3-story building would be 3 floors of 1 unit. Large luxury apartments. Obviously, people wouldn't do that today. But that's what this ordinance leads to. Under the proposed requirement, we're allowing for what was built. So we're allowing for this historic, what our historic code in the 20s allowed to build. Another example, this is one that's actually being proposed in the city. And on the left, you can see that under the current requirements, just to have that amount of open space, there would only be permitted to have 8 units in total. These are 2 buildings. The blue squares are individual buildings, and each one is, I think it's 4 stories. So we could get 8 units. Under the proposed, because of the way we change it and allow for greater flexibility in smaller projects, we would get 22 units. So the projects from the outside would look exactly the same. You might not know, if you weren't paying attention, that the same 4-story buildings were cut up into 11-unit buildings or 4-unit buildings. They would have to meet the city's tree canopy preservation ordinance. They would have the same amount of trees. The open space may be grass. It may have trees in it. We don't know. It would depend on them. It would have the same number of parking, but we would lose a significant number of housing units if we don't implement this change. Now we're looking at subdivisions. So this is the carving up of lots when we want to build homes. We don't have a lot of free land, so we don't see a lot of subdivisions, but they still happen. Under our current regulations, we require 20% of the property to be set aside as open space. And what we see, this is a real-life example. The blue little shapes are homes, and the yellow are the proposed open spaces. They typically are tucked in behind properties where the land isn't as easily accessible, it isn't as good, isn't as easy to develop. So what we're proposing is that there's a little bit of reduction down from 10 to 15%, and that more of that open space is on the frontage of the street, so that if somebody is having a barbecue and wanting to invite friends, it's kind of obvious that it's on the street. However, through some feedback from the public and more interest in trees, we've added a clause that says, as an alternative approach in a subdivision, you can instead choose to provide 10% more tree canopy preservation, and that allows you to not have to provide open space in the subdivision. And the community wins by getting more trees, and potentially in a case like this, the developer might get another housing unit, which they would want to see, and we see, to provide more housing supply. So it really seems like a real positive win that we came up with. We're getting close to the end. So for commercial development, this is a similar chart, and what you see here is that many cities don't require open space for commercial properties. We do. On the right, there are 2 bars for Asheville under the condition under today and proposed. Now, under the proposed, people might think, why are we proposing an enormous amount of open space? Well, it's actually for a very creative solution that we're excited about for stormwater, and this is the one slide to show that. What we're saying is that for large parcels, if you're over an acre, most infill projects are not required to provide mitigation, so they're not required to sort of capture and hold that stormwater for a little bit because of certain existing rules in the state. What we're suggesting is that if you're larger than an acre, you have to set aside half of your parcel for open space. But if you choose to voluntarily comply with the city's stormwater mitigation policy, will allow you to move down to only having to provide the amount required for a smaller project. So it's a great incentive to get a lot more property complying with stormwater.
What is that noise? Is she trying to speak?
Is it a
Is she- I thought she
Are
was
you the,
attempting-
Councilwoman Rooney, are you okay in terms of hearing? No?
I can hear you. I am not trying to speak.
Oh, okay, good. We heard a beep, but we weren't sure what was going on. Vidila, to be clear, this part's very confusing, the stormwater part is confusing. State law preempts us from requiring stormwater mitigation for projects over an acre.
As I understand it, I am not the stormwater expert, but that the language states that we cannot require a project to mitigate stormwater if they are reducing their imperviousness. So if you have a parking lot.
Under state law. Again,
Under state
I mean,
law.
I just want to make it clear, this is another one of these areas where we're stuck with the option to incentivize rather than mandate, because we don't have a mandate option because we're preempted under state law. So there's many areas that work like that, like affordable housing requirements in projects. You just heard one. We can incentivize through the WEEG program, but we can't require it. So just, that's what we're getting into with this stormwater situation. We're trying to figure out how to manage our stormwater situation, which is a growing problem in the city. And as I understand this proposal, it would find a way to incentivize development management of stormwater where we can't mandate.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, thank you for highlighting that. It is state regulations that are hamstringing us from having better stormwater mitigation in place. So this is a creative solution because no project is going to want, likely, to set aside half of their parcel for open space. And so most will choose to do the work that should be done to manage our growing stormwater problem. Just a few more slides. We have an incentive for good design. What we're saying is that if you provide seating, if you provide a flatter surface that is accessible to the public, especially people who have disabilities and a hard time getting around, if you provide a space that is more cohesive rather than broken up open spaces, and that's regular in shape, we will allow you to reduce your open space by 5%. And the goal is that we would achieve something more like this, that we would create social spaces where people can enjoy themselves and their friends and their families. Versus, on the bottom right, this is a real example from one of our open spaces in a part of Asheville that just sort of falls off from behind some parking, and most people wouldn't know that it's not just a large setback. So we're trying to do better for our open spaces for people. I won't go through this again, but this is just a summary in case you have any questions or thoughts. This is the proposed, the current versus the proposed. And again, the key takeaways that this is a text amendment that is mostly affecting private development and private open spaces. We are seeking to balance goals that clearly are in some ways, it's kind of a seesaw, trying to provide both. And most importantly, we're trying to remove the barriers to infill housing while balancing and creating more high quality and accessible open spaces. And to remind everybody, because I've heard a lot about this concern that we're, through this ordinance, denuding the trees of Asheville, that open space is separate from the tree canopy efforts we're making. We measure open space on the ground plane, looking at the ground, and the tree canopy standards are measured by canopy, which is above. So in many ways, they can overlap. They can be in the same places. They can be next to each other. And so they work together. So we are requesting, that's letting you know that staff recommends approval of this amendment because we believe it's reasonable, in the public interest, and consistent with the city's goals, in that the changes improve open space regulations by creating more usable open spaces, removing conflicts that inhibit a greater production of infill housing, incentivize better stormwater management for larger parcels, and supporting walkable transit-supported neighborhoods by encouraging more efficient land use without increasing the cost of development. Thank you. That concludes my presentation.
Council, do you have questions?
I have a question.
Badilli, we got questions.
I have a question. And I could have missed it or whatever, but I know this basically more or less takes in consideration private developers. So I'm just wondering, do you offer any types of incentives if the private developers actually open this open space for public use?
No, you're asking if we're incentivizing...
No. If there is ways that if a private developer opens this open space up to public use, then they get incentivized a little bit, something to sort of...
We do that for greenways. What we
Okay.
say is that if a parcel is developed and it's on the parcel, it's part of the Greenway Master Plan, so we want some land to be dedicated to the city, that we allow them to meet their open space standards by gifting that piece of the parcel to the city. So in that sense, it does become city property, and we want that because it's very hard to convince property owners to give up their property for anything.
That's what I was concerned about, a way that we could actually get them to do more. So, okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
But we have on our desk this motion to amend the language in 711-4F. Is that something you want to talk about, or is there a council member who's going to talk about that?
Or is Brad going to talk
Or is
about
Brad
that?
going to, or?
Or maybe Rachel, who wrote the email.
I can start if you want, just to give you a brief overview. So in the code, I have it here just to make sure I'm reading the right thing. We have a special section that says that if you're part of one of these large parcels, that you're required to meet the city's stormwater mitigation if you want to have the amount of open space reduced. And there are, the first one is that you meet stormwater. If you meet stormwater, you can reduce your open space. The second clause says that if you're affordable housing, that, and the project is predominantly, and we're saying at least 50% residential, and that over 30% of the units are affordable, that essentially what we're trying to say is that you don't have to meet the stronger open space standards. And I think the suggestion here, rather than specifically calling out that, that they must meet affordability at this 80% area median income, to be more flexible, what we're proposing is that that could instead say shall be at or below those meeting the median area income as stated in the LUIGE program. That
That-
way,
In case
if we
Luigi
adjust that
changes.
grant,
Yeah.
It'll
that-
track.
that we don't
Right.
have to come back and adjust this.
You don't have to come back and amend this if there is an amendment to the Luigi.
Exactly.
Which we know is sort of on the list of what we're
Horizon.
going to look at next. So
Right.
you're just making it tie in together so we don't have to amend again. Okay.
Except for the 30%, because Luigi says 20. So what's the reasoning behind the 30 here?
The idea was that we wanted to make sure that these were really affordable projects. So if we want to be less, I guess if we want to be more in line with Luigi and consistent, we can do that. The thinking here was that we were kind of pushing and trying to get more affordability. So yeah, in summary, what this is trying to do, there's been a community conversation about what is open space doing with affordability in this clause, and knowing that there may be updates with the Luigi grant, what we're suggesting is let's just relate this to Luigi, and then the community can continue to have its conversation, and if that changes, this will be, it will affect this at the same time.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought, but I just wanted to highlight that that's been a change just discussed today. Okay, thank you.
I think Councilwoman Romani? Yes.
Thank you. I just, as a liaison to the Neighborhood Advisory Committee and the Urban Forestry Commission, I want to remind that we have recommendations to not approve the open space amendment as drafted. Concerns included depth of affordability, which we've talked about here, impact on neighborhoods vulnerable to gentrification, impact on tree canopy maintenance and restoration, and also a concern that if we incentivize with fee in lieu, we don't yet have a clear path to utilize fee in lieu for other open spaces. In the absence of a community benefits table, I get that incentives can be tools to ensure best practices. But if we maintain high standards, we can still get approval for development through conditional zoning. The stormwater incentives are obviously sorely needed. But I wonder if before loosening the development standards for open space, we could, one, incentivize deeper affordability at 60% of the area median income, not 80. Get the Luigi in alignment with this instead of the other way around. And then consider pausing approval until the new urban forester is hired so we can review for tree canopy impact. I would hate for us to bring a new staff member on board and have this policy and that staff member's work be in conflict when we have an opportunity to get it right. We've already been batting this around for a while.
Okay, any other?
I just wanted to thank you, Vidila, for such a thorough explanation. I know my inbox today has had some confusing emails, and as if some of the folks sending them weren't quite understanding what was before us today. And I think that your presentation explained it very well, and hopefully, maybe I'll send it to some of those emails later. But
Thank you.
really thorough job, and also wow on strict consensus along the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And sticking with it for 3 years, right? That's
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah,
That's
it's been a
tough.
long
And
process.
really appreciate your tenacity.
Thank you.
If there aren't any other questions from council, we do have a number of people signed up to speak under this item, so I'm going to start working through the folks signed up to speak. And the first person signed up to speak, folks, this is only our second time in the council chamber since before COVID. So to review, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. There's lights on the lectern. Green means go, orange means your time's almost up, and red means stop, and it'll beep. We have 2 groups that have ceded time to a single speaker, so that single speaker will be allotted 10 minutes. And so with that, I'm gonna begin. So the first person signed up to speak is Sharon Summerall. But so Sharon, you're just speaking on your own. You're not for a group.
No, I have the 3.
Oh, I'm sorry. You are one of the, it's lower on my list. Okay.
Sharon
So
got it.
Larry Williamson, raise your hand. Ceded your time, and Everybody, you gotta use really good handwriting when you sign this. Victoria, is it Victoria? Yes, okay. And then we also have Lynn Hurley. Okay, thank you. All right, so 10 minutes.
Thank you. Mayor, council members, city manager, my name is Sharon Summerall. I am currently a member of the Urban Forestry Commission, Neighborhood Advisory Committee, and the Coalition of Asheville Neighborhoods. I was also a member of 2 subcommittees that worked with Vidilla on the open space ordinance revisions, and contrary to what Vidilla stated, there was not a consensus. I am representing myself in the opposition of open space, but UFC, NAC, and CAN have officially submitted their opposition to the new ordinance. This is what I see as major issues of the current open space ordinance. First, neighborhoods were not consulted nor asked for any input. There was no direct outreach. For instance, I'm a member of Easton Valley Neighborhood Association, and they are concerned. First, our boundaries are 100% opportunity zones. 2/3 of our empty properties are owned by people with addresses either out of the Buncombe County area or out of the state. These statistics are available on Buncombe County GIS. There is extreme concern, and rightly so, with the past history of redlining that our original families experienced and current families live without knowledge. Speculators knock on our doors, hound us on the phone to sell our property. We see predator buying and selling, and we at Easton Valley are trying to reach out to our older population to advise of the true value of their homes. What does this have to do with open space reduction? Trust. Currently, there is no trust within the neighborhoods that the city has their best interest at heart. The Preservation Society stepped in for Easton Valley and purchased Cappadocia Church and the house next door as developers are wanting to tear down the church and the house, and also purchase the 2 empty lots in between and build townhomes or condos that no one in our neighborhood or most of the other neighborhoods could afford to move into. So with the Preservation Society's help, they bought Cappadocia and the house, and with a whole lot of community sweat equity, Cappadocia was gutted, as is the house, and there's talk of how to provide low-cost housing in Cappadocia or a housing community for kids that do not have families, and selling the single house to a family at the lowest possible denominator. We at Easton Valley are working on an area plan with a vision for the future to bring back our Black community and other families into Easton Valley. There's hope that reparations money will assist in Easton Valley's future to make this a reality. Why do I bring up this example? Because in the City Council work session handout, there's a bullet point saying severe housing supply shortage as one of the reasons to decrease the amount of open space. Another bullet point states alleviating supply constraints would have significant impact on the racial wealth gap. Now, we all know that we cannot build our way out of a housing shortage. To supply housing to our citizens of families that established Asheville and that live and work in Asheville requires housing that is commensurate with our income. I've been in construction trade all my career, and the cost of construction never goes down and never will. And to assume that building condos, townhomes, or homes that the average cost is $350,000 and up will help alleviate the racial wealth gap is short-sighted. We talk about the missing middle, also stated in the work session handout. In my neighborhood, the missing middle are all the short-term rentals that are single-family, whole house, illegal rentals that the city of Asheville cannot control because we lack the zoning enforcement personnel to get these houses rented to families or sold to families. This iteration of open space only incentivizes. I realize that we cannot mandate, but we can certainly require area median income, AMI, to be realistic to the neighborhood that the new units will reside, 60 to 40%, a percentage of housing vouchers perhaps. I sit on the technical review committee, and I've seen very few developers opt for any area median income reductions unless they are exceeding their density requirements or opting for a land use incentive grant. And then the standard ask for AMI is 80%. How does that alleviate the racial wealth gap? Last week, I attended the Southside United Neighborhood Association meeting. There is so much mistrust on what the city plans to do regarding housing. Has the city asked them how they'd like to see their neighborhood in the future? Plans on a page and vision plans are not binding, and the comp plan is just an ideal. I heard at the meeting what the people want. South French Broad has stated in regards to open space that they want to leave to their heirs the ability to build on their lots to attain monetary stability, but they do not want South French Broad devoid of trees and lined with apartments or condos. One of council goals for the coming year is neighborhood resiliency. Resiliency is the ability of something to return to its original size and shape. We may not be able to attain this, but we certainly can abide by what each of our neighborhoods envisions for their future. I do not do social media, but I received a lot of questions regarding an example project that made its way through social media, as it is used as an example project in the council open space work session. It is the project between Chestnut and Monroe, 120 units with 5,200 square foot footprint, and currently open space stated as 77%. Mr. DeJong and myself sent an email to Mr. Oklachaney of Planning and Urban Development asking for an explanation, and he stated that this was meant to demonstrate that the current open space is very high. But he also stated that they are not aware of any project moving forward with this percentage. This project was built before the current open space and does not reflect parking requirements. What I'm trying to say is that this example is hyperbolic and not a real-time example of current open space. But Mr. Oklachaney did cite a West Asheville development that was not included in the council work session. I happened to be involved in this when a neighbor called the UFC to look at a huge old oak tree that the developer needed to remove to build a driveway for a 2-story, 12-unit apartment building at 2,100 square feet with an existing 2-story, 4-unit building that was 2,200 square feet and an existing garage at 2,100 square feet, which would also have had to include interior parking and a 10-foot setback from her 1920s house. Her complaint was, do they have to make it so big, and can we save the tree? To make things easier for the city and for developers, we tend to make ordinances one size fits all. We need to seriously think about our neighborhoods, as once this ordinance is implemented, it is almost impossible to turn back. True affordable housing is what we need, not more high-end speculative building crammed together without proper buffering or space. I would like to touch on the open space reduction in the tree canopy protection ordinance. This ordinance has gone a long way into preserving older established trees, but we do not have the statistics yet as to what total percentage of trees and green infrastructure we are losing as opposed to what we are saving. Reduced open space, you reduce green infrastructure, plain and simple. Sitting on the technical review committee, a common conditional zoning request is to reduce property line buffer widths or to ask for removal of buffers altogether. And with the already reduced space, this is naturally going to reduce green space considerably. The incentivization for stormwater in the new open space ordinance, in my opinion, is of high concern. With Raleigh not being our friend and not allowing us to set our standards for restructuring stormwater controls, and the South French Broad River water report being abysmal, this is an excellent incentive. But to add hardscape, which will occur with the reduction of open space, means more runoff. Green infrastructure, such as trees and shrubs and soil, do the best in the filtering of stormwater. This is scientifically known. Neighborhood character is at stake. Climate change is a reality. New housing in Asheville has not been for the people that live here. Accessory dwelling units, homestays, and additional housing are a necessity, as well as dealing with our multimodal issues, which, as we know, tie into housing and our carbon footprint. But to incentivize open space reduction for the only ones that benefits, the builders, especially the ones that take land use incentive grant tax credit, turn around and sell the buildings at twice what the land use incentive grant was originally for, seems to rip off the city, and the city is the people that live here, including all of you. Please consider the impact of this ordinance and consider a little more time to make this an ordinance that benefits the neighborhoods and not just the developers. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person signed up to speak is Margie Bukowski, sorry. I was trying to decide if that was a T or a K. Got it.
Mayor, City Manager, and Council, thank you for letting me speak this evening on the open space. I am the Vice Chair of the Affordable Housing Advisory Council Board. I also work in the construction industry for affordable housing, and I spent 8 to 10 months on the Open Space Committee 3 to 5 hours every month, every 2 weeks, and it was a challenge. It was very interesting. I want to talk to you about density. I'm coming at this from a very practical standpoint because I'm in the construction industry. Density and efficiency is what you have to have today to make the numbers work. It doesn't matter, the developers are not out to rob everybody. Construction companies are not out to rob everybody. And we're there to do something good for the community. When you're looking at building in Asheville or Western North Carolina, you have rock and soil issues. There's so little space that is actually good to be able to build on. You have to have flexibility. I understand having open space, and I'm not saying that it should not be considered very valuable, but the ability to be flexible, to have less so we can get more density, that's the way we're going to solve our affordable housing problem. Our housing problem in general is that we need density. And I can give you some examples such as 319 Biltmore. We need density there. That is, I look at what happened at Lee Walker Heights, Maple Crest, that's 212 units. We need to be able to have 400 units right next to it. There are other places that we should be able to get 400 apartment units for affordable housing, and we can use all of our Luigi guidelines to do that, but we have to have the flexibility with the architects to be able to make this work. I hope that you understand that I'm coming from it from a cost perspective, with the cost increases that everyone is having to accept today, from the amount of material cost escalation. The cost of land here in Asheville and Western North Carolina is astronomical. Other places like Winston-Salem, Greensboro, Durham, Raleigh, they don't have the same issues that we do in trying to put up affordable housing. They're going forward. Durham is an excellent benchmark for us to look at so that we can see how they're addressing affordable housing and density and not having the same issues that we are today. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next is Norma Baines.
Good evening to the Honorable Mayor Manhauer, the Vice Mayor, and City Council. My name is Norma Baines. I'm the liaison for the Shallow Community Association, and I'm also going to speak for the Shallow community and our association. When we heard about the proposed for open space amendment, we talked about it among ourselves and sort of looked at what the amendment was saying. We realized that this would cause high density in our neighborhood, which is a factor, I guess, in some of the other neighborhoods also. We talked about the design of what would the design be? Will it be tall, or would the houses be shorter, or what would the structure be? What would the setbacks be? So this is all concerning to our neighborhood and the people in our neighborhood. Is it environmental friendly? Do you have green spaces? You know, we are very happy about our shallow garden. If you haven't seen it, we invite you to come out on Hampton Street and look at our shallow garden and our Legacy Art Trail where we have green spaces. But one of the things in looking at the proposed open space amendment, I thought about what happened a few years ago when the city decided to change the setbacks for the houses in the neighborhood so that they could be closer. And I looked around, and I do have some pictures here. That's what's happening in our neighborhood.
You can lay them here on the monitor.
And I would like for you to really look at them because they're crowded in so that they can't even face the street where they're supposed to be, some of it. And you look at them and you see, how can you put trees or anything there? Oh, can I put one at a time? Okay. I'm sorry about the color because my printer was not working too well. As you see that one, that's a house on Booker Street. And then you see them trying to do another house. Then this is where they built the other house. And that's our church, Rock Hill Missionary Baptist Church, that they put the back of it there. So the front of the house is not facing Booker Street, but it's facing the other people that have the other house there.
Okay, sorry, Ms. Baines, your time is up. But if
Oh,
you've
my
got,
time's
if you've
up?
got, you
Okay.
can hand.
I will leave these right
Maggie will
here.
take your handouts and hand them around to us so we can take a look at them.
Okay, I appreciate this time, thank you.
Thank you. The next person signed up to speak is Chris Joyelle.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council. Hello, my name is Chris Joyelle, and I'm the Director of the Asheville Design Center and the Healthy Communities Program at Mountain True. On behalf of Mountain True, I'm speaking in support of the City of Asheville's amendments to the Open Space Ordinance. As an environmental advocacy organization, Mountain True recognizes the undeniable connection between housing and the integrity of our natural environment. Our community currently faces two mounting crises, affordable housing and climate change, and these two issues must be addressed in concert. We can do this by providing a wider range of housing options within our city while not contributing to the sprawling development patterns that clear forested land, feed gridlock, and increase auto emissions. As our city service workers, school teachers, and nurses find it more and more difficult to find an affordable housing in Asheville, they're forced to live outside the city. That results in more people driving longer distances into the city every day, contributing more greenhouse gases to our atmosphere while chewing up more undeveloped land in the county and beyond. The state projects that 80,000 people will be moving to Buncombe County in the next 25 years. We need to direct that development to the places that are most well-equipped to absorb new residents, places like Asheville. The development of modest-sized, compactly built, energy-efficient housing within walking distance of jobs and services is one of the best antidotes to climate change. The open space amendments get us closer to this goal. 5 years ago, Council adopted middle housing policies to address our housing crisis, but missing middle development continues to hit roadblocks. The proposed amendment will unlock more lots for infill development and help us address our affordable housing crisis. If we don't do this now, we will never achieve our goals of the middle housing policy. While we have serious concerns about the city's urban tree canopy, we are confident that the Asheville City Council can use the existing tree ordinance to protect our city's trees. These two ordinances can work together too. By consolidating open space while protecting existing trees within, we can maximize our ability to protect our urban canopy. So for these reasons, Mountain True supports the proposed amendment to the open space ordinance. I want to thank you for your consideration and for the opportunity to speak and actually see you tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. The next person signed up to speak is Core Jock. I'm saying that right.
Thanks. I have been watching this council work for a long time and been involved in lobbying, going door to door, trying to get people elected, trying to get represented as a resident more, trying to feel represented. And a lot of time I don't feel represented. I feel like, all right, let me back that up and say, there might be a way of looking at this gig for y'all as city council members as like, well, I came here with a certain skill set, like a lot of y'all might have like skill sets in realty and development and stuff. But really, what we need for city council representing this town is somebody represent the residents, the working folk, people who got to pay rent, people who love this place and are from North Carolina, and not like I hear development community thrown around like as a term, like that's some underrepresented, marginalized group that needs to be heard the same way as like other groups of residents. But other groups of residents don't try to like squeeze every dollar they can out of the resources of our community. Like this development community is getting catered to as if they're like an equal voice, really not an equal voice, a much more important voice than the residents of this area. And what I want y'all to look at this job as an opportunity to be stewards of a completely unique place, a beautiful landscape, but incredibly valuable resources. The water that's produced in this part of the mountains is possibly the most valuable thing in future years that will exist in this area. This landscape needs to be protected. The idea that the way people throw around like, oh, but we need affordable housing. We don't need more affordable housing for wealthy white people from Florida and New York and California to keep coming in and taking over the place till you can't recognize it. And there's hardly anybody who's from here around anymore because everybody's been priced out. That's my main point. Please look at this as an opportunity to be stewards of a very valuable place. Thank you.
Thank you.
And by that, I mean, please oppose the open space amendment, which is worded to sound like it's a good thing, but it's not.
The next person signed up to speak is Perrin DeJong, and we have a number of people that are ceding their time. Carol Carter, here, thank you, and Alan Eskovitz, thank you, and Karen McNeil, thank you, and I think this is, wait, well, I got one more sheet. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Perrin DeJong, and I am not here to speak on behalf of the Urban Forestry Commission or the Center for Biological Diversity. I'm just here to speak on my own behalf as a 12-year resident of Asheville and as an activist with a tremendous amount of experience on this particular topic. And I'm here to ask you to vote no on the open space amendment tonight. And the first point I would like to make about the open space amendment is that it is a deregulatory initiative that's aimed at removing the open space protections we currently have. And opposition to this amendment does not create barriers to new housing construction. And the reason we know that is because under the current open space requirements of the city of Asheville, as you can see here, Asheville is building the most homes, is among the cities building the most homes in America. Also, by the way, Asheville, Buncombe County, and the nation are now entering a housing recession, as the CEO of the National Association of Home Builders is explaining on Bloomberg News here a few days ago, undercutting the rationale for deregulating development in the city of Asheville to increase housing supply.
If you'll use the mic in front, that one's on? Oh, never mind, I'm sorry, okay.
Can I get 20 more seconds, please? If current ordinances are not a barrier to new housing, then what is the open space amendment for? Is it for increasing affordability of housing, improving stormwater runoff in the city of Asheville, fighting sprawl? Let's look at each of these rationales in turn. The open space amendment would not improve housing affordability in Asheville on balance. First of all, the quote-unquote affordable housing incentive is optional. We don't know that any developers will actually take it. But if any developers do take the incentive, it would not produce any housing which is in fact affordable to the working class, teachers, nurses, servers, artists, bartenders, firemen, and police who keep this town running every day. Thirdly, any quote-unquote affordable housing that would be produced as a result of this incentive would be temporary, so this is not a long-term fix for affordability in the city of Asheville. And perhaps most importantly, accelerated development resulting from the open space amendment, which is what, by design, this would deregulate most big development projects in the city of Asheville, will just accelerate status quo development in the city of Asheville, where developers build the most expensive units that they can sell because that's how they make the most money. And that accelerates gentrification, driving up the cost of living for us all. Secondly, if it's not about affordability, is it about improving stormwater runoff? Again, this is the stormwater mitigation incentive is simply an incentive. It's optional. We don't know that any developers will actually take it. But what we do know is that on balance, accelerating status quo development and gentrification in Asheville will accelerate the trend of urban deforestation, resulting in less trees, more pavement, and that is the recipe for exacerbating flooding in the city of Asheville, which, by the way, is the #1 threat to the city of Asheville from climate change, according to climate models. And an open space amendment is showing up just in time to make that even worse, even faster. So what about preventing sprawl outside of Asheville? This is another common popular refrain about the amendment. First of all, Asheville's powerless to regulate development outside of the city of Asheville and the county, so obviously the amendment will do nothing to limit development in Buncombe County. But maybe more importantly, the city and county are both being swarmed by developers eager to sell expensive housing to the rich. This is how they make the most money. And so, if you ratify the open space amendment, all it will do is ensure that both the county and the city are overrun with overdevelopment. So if it's not about affordability, preventing flooding, or fighting sprawl, what then is the open space amendment for? It's a deregulatory gift basket of wish list items for developers dressed up in pretty words. I've already spoken about those pretty words and how false they are tonight. But what's in the gift basket? The first thing in the gift basket is general deregulation of open space requirements across the board for most big developments in the city. This isn't just about deregulating affordable housing, this is about deregulating development. And as you can see, these cuts are quite significant. They're quite extreme to the baseline open space requirements. But that wasn't enough for the authors of the Open Space Amendment. They wanted to provide loopholes, too, for allowing developers to dodge even these meager, new, reduced open space requirements. And so, for example, they can get an 80% cut in exchange for quote-unquote affordable housing that's not affordable, as we discussed. Another 80% cut for complying with mandatory stormwater requirements. What's that about? There's also a 10% cut for pedestrian accessible seating. I don't know why we're talking about trading away valuable open space, which even we heard the developer representative speak tonight about how developers recognize the value of open space. I don't know why we're trading that away for pedestrian seating that should be mandatory for bigger residential, commercial, industrial developments. So in total, they can get a 90% reduction by combining these loopholes. And that wasn't enough. We've still got naked, shameless giveaways to developers in the Open Space Amendment. For example, allowing developers to double count separately required property line buffers for 100% of their open space required, meaning that it gives them an out from providing any open space whatsoever. They can count half of their building setbacks as open space, eliminating half of their obligation. they can eliminate 80% of their open space requirements under the new baseline by complying with mandatory stormwater provisions at 712.2A6. This is just a naked giveaway to developers where the public pays the price and the developers reap all the benefits. And that's no good. It's a ripoff for local residents. And as a final slap in the face, private balconies are allowed to count as open space, ensuring that private developers and private parties get all the benefits of open space, and the public is robbed of any opportunity to get those benefits. You can't plant a tree in a concrete balcony. And fourth, fee in lieu provisions. It's always been the case that developers can pay their way out of 100% of their open space obligations by paying a fee to the city. And this raises the question, why slash the underlying open space requirements in the first place, given that what that will do is rob the city of desperately needed funds to purchase new parkland and offset the losses to open space. Also, we heard about consensus, strict consensus tonight, over the repeated objections of multiple open space task force members. Planning and urban development staff refused to address how, why, and when open space fee in lieu funds may be used to purchase new city parklands and offset losses of open space, thus ensuring that the city will lose the race to purchase desirable new parklands to developers who will gobble it up while the city voluntarily and knowingly sits on its hands. So that's how you do development policy the wrong way. But why do we care about open space? Urban canopy protection and restoration is foremost among them. 45% of the city is in urban canopy. And if you take out all the parking lots and driveways and streets and everything, that means a lot more than half of the open space in Asheville is in tree canopy. So you protect the canopy. You also have opportunities to restore the canopy because you can't plant a tree in concrete, but you can in open ground. And that open ground also absorbs rainfall and prevents flooding. That vegetation that grows in open space can cool the air, preventing the heat island effect, purifies air quality for local residents, buffers urban noise, provides wildlife habitat that is so fundamental to our identity as a city we all fell in love with.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please vote no on the open space amendment.
Thank you. The next person signed up to speak under this item is Nina Tovish.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I think we can all agree that affordability is a good thing, that well-planned and implemented infill is an environmentally sound choice, and that removing barriers to building affordably is a good idea. My concern here is that the devil is in the details. One thing that I noticed in the city presentation this evening was a curious modifier which said that this ordinance would apply mostly to private property. What is that qualification about? I'd love to hear some clarification on that, because that raises questions. Why is it mostly about private property and not absolutely only about private property? I also share Councilmember Roney's concern, which is we are about to bring an urban forestry on board. And although I have heard and understood the ways in which the tree preservation ordinance can interact with this proposed ordinance, I think we need to zoom out and have a bigger picture. And it seems to me that the wise choice is to press pause on this ordinance until an urban forester is in place
and that individual can work on the larger picture in preserving and restoring tree canopy and how it would interact with this ordinance. I imagine that the person that you hire for this job will have something to say about this, and one would hope and expect some experience in dealing with the interaction between this kind of zoning issue and the preservation of and expansion of tree canopy. It also raises for me the issue of our UDO in general. This is an important change to the UDO, and I am concerned that we have been tinkering around the edges of our UDO for years now. We have overlays, we have exceptions. Virtually every project that comes to council is looking for some kind of variance or some kind of adjustment to the zoning in the project that they're proposing. I feel that it would benefit the city, again, to take a deep breath and pause. I know zoning is tremendously complicated and contentious, but it seems to me that we need to take a big picture look again at how our UDO can be revised. Thank you for your attention this evening.
Barry Bialik?
Hello, everybody. My name is Barry Bialik. I'm the chair of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee for the City of Asheville, and I'm also a big bad developer. I didn't know I was coming here to talk about receiving a gift basket, but sometimes we talk about a lot. We've talked about a lot of stuff over the years, about affordable housing and about building, and we press pause a lot. We stall a lot. And sometimes we need to look at good enough, and we need to look at perfection, and we need to accept good enough for the time. We can change things, we can adapt things, but I've watched so many things get stalled, and it's time to just take some action. I'm going to give a few examples of why this is such an important tool for more housing in the city of Asheville. So, first of all, I've looked around the room, I've built 4 houses for people that are in this room right now. So, I focus, I'm a missing middle developer. I focus on figuring out how to build dense to allow more homes to fit on smaller pieces of parcels. And I try to do it realistically. I've actually never built anything tighter than a duplex, so I build a lot of standalone homes on small footprint lots and then duplexes. But so I'm a missing middle developer. The project I'm finishing in South Asheville, I put 45 units on 2 acres. Nothing's more than a duplex. The average house price in Asheville, we know, is about $570,000. Over the past year and a half, every house I've closed in that property was between $190,000 and $317,000. They went to city workers. They went to factory workers. 4 of the units were bought by a mission-based investor who rents them out for voucher housing. And there was no city funding taken for my project. I didn't take a penny, didn't ask for a penny. I went to 45 where I could have gone I did not want to come to city council. I knew if I went over 49, I would have had to do that. So we designed a project, stayed at 45, and the reason I did 45 instead of 49 is because of my open space requirements. So let's look at this. This site was 80,774 square feet. The difference we're talking about here is 5% open space. 5% open space on my project was 4,038 square feet. I would have gotten 4 more units on my development. 4 more units of missing middle housing that have created housing with no city subsidy, no funding. We've got a mix of, and it's a true mixed income community. It's what we want. There's homeowners, there's rentals, both at market rate and at least the 4 accepting vouchers. So I just want to use that project as an example of what this 5% difference makes and how there are so many of us out here who are not big bad developers who are actually trying really hard. So, thank you so much. Appreciate it, and I hope you vote yes tonight.
Scott Adams? No, choose the next. That's the last one.
Good evening. I'm Scott Adams. I'm a city planner, and I was on I'm on the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, and I was part of the Open Space Revisions Task Force. I'm here to speak tonight in favor of the proposed amendments on 3 basic points. First, on design freedom. Property owners and builders need design freedom to create projects that work. The current standard requires a minimum 24-foot width for any open space in a project. This room is just shy of about 30 feet wide. The proposed standard proposes a minimum width of 10 feet, so that's inherently just a more flexible spatial proposition. In terms of design flexibility, again, the current standard, even if you're building between 8 and 19 units, requires 500 square feet of open space per residential unit, or 15%, whichever is greater. 500 square feet could be a studio apartment or a small one-bedroom apartment. It's about this corner of this room. Lastly, I want to speak to design fairness, and that's both to the individual and to the larger community. The current standards do not allow any essentially partial or whole use of things like setbacks, landscape buffers, or aquatic buffers. These can require significant amounts of space, particularly on small urban sites, which are mostly what's left within our city limits. We're a hilly, relatively land-constrained city, 45 square miles, limited annexation opportunities. So every square foot counts. That's what I really encourage you to think about. This is an amendment that really has both a human element and also a very spatial element. Lastly, I think this amendment really builds on the flexibility, again, to individuals, whether they be a property owner or developer, and to the larger community in terms of looking at using our space, our land space within the city limits more efficiently and more flexibly. This is not, a wholesale elimination of the existing standards. It's a modification of the existing standards. And in many ways, it's trying to right size and make proportional the requirements for sites depending on their size. So again, thank you for listening. I encourage you to vote in favor of this. It is not perfect, but it is very good. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last person signed up to speak under this item is Callie Warren.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I sometimes feel like I'm at a line dance in the pitch black because there are things that happen in one direction and then it veers off in another direction. And I know you all signed a carbon-free by 2030, which everybody got national attention for. We're all excited about it. And the one thing that trees do is it sequesters carbon. And one thing that has really happened in the last 5 years is 900 acres of trees have been demolished in our downtown. If this gets passed, there's going to be a lot more heat island index and a lot fewer trees. That is just an inevitable reality. And I think when it comes to affordability, as Piran mentioned, and in studies that I have read, like Austin, Texas, Bend, Oregon, those were cities that used to be like Asheville was maybe 5 years ago, is changing very quickly. And the affordability that people were there, artists like me, people who worked in the city, they aren't living in the city anymore. Those cities changed so much and so drastically that they can't afford to live there anymore. We had people who were living affordably in old houses. If we had a deconstruction ordinance, which is another topic, we could keep the people in the houses and provide infill around them in the spirit of the neighborhoods, keeping and honoring the tree canopies that are there. Because tourists have said to me, they don't want to come here anymore because it is so hot downtown and there's so much fewer trees. And trees really make everybody happier. So I know, Esther, you're going to be there on Monday night to fight to save Pisgah Forest. The trees in Pisgah Forest are connected to our urban trees. They are all connected. We are all connected. And the more we realize that and honor that, and find solutions that are actually not going to completely destroy the rest of the beauty of downtown and infill it so that we become Austin, Texas in the next 5 years, we can do it in creative ways. And I just want to encourage that you wait on this, having approved an urban forester, let the urban forester, give it a year and let the urban forester assess the tree canopy that is there. And then come back a year from now where we as a community can be involved in this, because the affordable housing at 80% AMI is not affordable, and we all know that. So that is not going to change. The more people who move here and buy their second homes, third homes, fourth homes, sixth homes, makes it less possible for these things to happen. And I just urge you to take a step back and not approve this now. Wait until we have a year with the urban forester in the position that he's in, and then we can look at how well we can accommodate and use the good things about this open space amendment and combine it with the work that the urban forester does. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, that is the last person who signed up to speak under this item. We heard some lengthy presentations and some information that I'm wondering if staff could address any of the, if there are any of the things that we might have heard, just to make sure we're all operating with the same information. I think this is a really confusing ordinance. We've actually done a full work session on it, and it's still to understand the interplay between all the different parts of the UDO. Ms. Bain showed us a picture that looked like it had to do with setback requirements, really more than anything. So I think would be helpful to me. I see them conferring. I'll give them a moment.
Additionally, I opened up the city has a open kind of map portal, and we were looking here at some of the neighborhoods mentioned, specifically Shiloh, which is predominantly single-family zones, so maybe not even as applicable.
Right, yeah, it's not clear to me how this ordinance would affect a single-family zone neighborhood such as Shiloh. Maybe staff wants to address that.
Thank you for the question, Ms. Baines. Yes, I want to remind everybody that the applicability for this standard is 8 units or more to begin with. So if there was a proposal, it would have to be either a subdivision in a single-family district, because we don't allow multifamily, so you can't have an apartment building with 8 units. That would be the trigger. So apartment buildings are not permitted in single-family, which Shiloh is mostly that. So is their property big enough to have a subdivision of 8 parcels?
Would be the question.
Is a big question. If there is, this would just amend that by reducing the amount of open space that those individual parcels would have to have. It wouldn't affect the setbacks. I want to be clear. We did not adjust setbacks in the last 5 years. We did adjust minimum lot size and lot width, but setbacks were not adjusted.
Right. And I think we are seeing a lot of infill in West Asheville and in Shiloh, where you're seeing a single-family home placed on a lot. And so just to be, this is terribly confusing, but to be clear, it would not apply unless we're talking about a large enough parcel of land that someone is actually putting 8 or more houses at one time, making it a subdivision in a neighborhood.
That's right.
And then Ms. Tovish brought up, you used the word mostly. And can you clarify that?
Sure.
Mostly relative to, it would mostly be private property.
This mostly affects private development.
Right.
Because the standards that we create, the city is held to them as well. And the city has its own property. So if we are to develop property and create affordable housing, we are required to abide by the UDO, and we would be required to provide open space. And so in those cases, that's city property, and most likely it would be more accessible, and it might still be relatively limited to the residents of a development, but in some cases it may be more open. And I mentioned in the beginning the Greenway example. That would be specifically a public part of a project that would be public. Very clearly.
Go ahead.
And it doesn't apply to parks and things like.
That's right. This does not apply to public parks.
Right.
If we choose to take one of our parks and develop it,
That's a whole, different.
I don't want to open up that can.
Don't even say that.
I mean, I refer to building a building for bike storage or something, we would have to comply with potential standards.
And the definition of open space is not, you displayed it early on. Is it being changed at all, or is it, it is my understanding that you're just saying this is what the definition currently is of open space?
That's right.
Including wooded areas.
Wooded areas are open space, and so a project could include open space and choose to put their tree preservation in the open space. They could choose to make it somewhere else, because they may want, through the design flexibility, to have a sunny spot for their residents who like the sun. I want to highlight, there was a couple of mentions about the tree canopy preservation ordinance, and I want you to know that as part of our open space task force, they recommended that we update the landscaping standards to make better landscaping requirements. And we have been doing that. We created a sub-working group for landscaping updates that has actually met already 25 times. And we're preparing in time to bring something to City Council that is very exciting and I believe will have more implications for Asheville in a very positive way than we can bring here, because we do not have the ability to require trees as part of this project.
That's an exciting addition. That's a long time coming, the landscaping updates.
Yes.
Thank you.
I just have one question. Could you maybe, I noticed that the two major concerns that people have are basically their concern about the tree canopy and their concern about the affordability issue. Maybe if you could sort of, because so much information, could you just give us sort of a brief synopsis of the affordability component so we can sort of, more or less get an idea of the benefits or whatever
Sure.
from this project?
So I guess I would, in my mind, think of how affordability can come about by this ordinance update is one of two ways. We are specifically allowing for affordable projects to not require as much open space. So we're just trying to make it easier to build affordability, because we always hear this concern that if you require more for affordable projects, it makes them less affordable. So that's one. And the second one is really behind this theory of allowing for more supply helps affordability across the board. Being part of this for years, I've heard the debate, and we can find plenty of articles stating that that's not true, and there's a lot of research showing that allowing more market rate housing for supply to increase helps to allow for more affordable housing at the middle and low income ranges. Without getting into that,
talking about supply,
we're talking
demand.
about
Supply,
increasing
demand.
housing supply, exactly.
Yeah.
And this, basically, our current ordinance has been putting downward pressure on supply for 25 years, as this has been in place, basically the same for that time.
Okay, so, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilwoman Roney, you had a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to note that we've addressed some of the concerns of some of the comments around historic Black and legacy neighborhoods, which we know have potential for multifamily development. And we also know the vulnerability index scores for those neighborhoods, the need for tree canopy repair and restoration, and the importance of stormwater mitigation. So I just wanted to name that I hear those concerns and that they are valid. I think we all do.
And if I can just respond, Councilman Roney, to that specific point, I guess the way I'm looking at this, and I'm not infallible, so is that a large part of this ordinance is looking to rebalance what we have found to be a significant hurdle for infill housing. So really what this is doing is providing more opportunities for neighborhoods to develop housing and more housing choices. And do we want more affordable, more opportunities for housing and more opportunities for housing choices in different neighborhoods? I think that's really the question.
Mr. Zopfier, do you know, I'm sorry, Kim, were you done?
No, it was Gwen.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So so much of this tree canopy preservation is coming from this study that the young NASA, I believe they might have been interns, GIS students, had done. And that was that 4 or 5 years ago now? I'm wondering, are there any queued updates? Because I know from that study that we saw, I remember being at AB Tech and learning about it in the 6%, but there were a lot of factors. The age of trees, there were vines choking trees. There are a lot of things we can be doing for trees, but I'm just wondering, before we put all the weight of saving the tree canopy on this open space ordinance, are we going to see a follow-up to that to know if we're progressing or getting worse?
Mm-hmm. Good question, and I should have mentioned this earlier. We are actively working to update the tree canopy preservation ordinance at the same time that we are actively working with this landscaping subcommittee that I mentioned to you to update the landscaping standards, because the two interact.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're making some very exciting changes, and those are forthcoming. But the short answer is yes, some changes. It's been a couple years. We've realized, staff as well as the public have realized that we need to make changes. We're in the process of doing that, and open space does not conflict with that. We can have tree canopy in open spaces, or we can have them in other places. For where developers want to be efficient with land, it would make sense to overlap them.
Mm-hmm.
But in larger projects, you don't have to do that. So it's there's flexibility.
Vidila, can you address another concern or comment around waiting until the urban forester is hired and having him or her, spend a year in their job and then adopt this? Can you comment on that?
Yes, certainly. Thank you. Well, first of all, the urban forester will have little to do with open space regulations. So, everybody can provide input, but they're really separate issues. Where the urban forester has more clout would be in updating the tree canopy preservation or landscape standards. I posed this specific question to our landscaping subcommittee, whether we should wait because we know that we're going to be hiring someone soon, and they said no, because we all know that any new staff will take 6 months to a year to get going, to understand the situation, the conditions, and they're not going to know as much as the people who are here working fighting the good fight, so to speak. So that was their perspective, and so we're moving this forward and hoping to come to you all with the updates to the tree canopy preservation and landscape standards within a reasonable time. So I don't think it matters.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Comments?
Thank you.
This is, we're now at the point, I can't believe this, we're finally at the point of where we would vote on this matter. It's been a long time, we've had this show up on our proposed agenda many times to have it moved out.
Is it actually two motions, or is the amendment blended in?
Brad, instruct us, please.
The motion that you see that's been provided to you is the result of a change in some of the wording in the proposed ordinance that came to us at staff level from some of the comments from council. Just to reiterate what Vidila had mentioned earlier, the original language tied the affordability trigger to 80% AMI, which is where our Luigi currently sits. The request from certain council members was that if Luigi changes, then this would be out of sync with that. So instead of simply leaving it at 80%, we now just tie it directly to whatever is stated in the Luigi policy. Therefore, if Luigi moves to some addition to new AMI, this will move as well. So right now, it's still exactly where the Luigi program is, but it would change if Luigi changed. So that is the change. If someone would like to make a motion including that right now, they can as the original motion. But because that language was not included in the original materials provided and published, we want to make sure that's specifically stated as a change.
So the motion's in the report, and then you would mention the additional language provided.
Basically, we're saying that this was emailed to us today and it wasn't in time in your agenda.
Yeah.
So we're
So the
keeping them.
motion just needs to, you just
I'm
need to
happy to
mention
make a
it.
motion.
Okay.
This is Sage. I motion to approve the proposed wording amendments to Chapter 7 of the UDO and find that the proposed amendments are reasonable and are in the public interest, are consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, and that the changes, 1, improve open space regulations by creating more usable open spaces, 2, removes conflicts that inhibit a greater production of infill housing, 3, incentivize better stormwater management for larger parcels, and 4, support walkable, transit-supported neighborhoods by encouraging more efficient land use without increasing the cost of development.
This is Gwen, I'll second.
And then we need to potentially amend with this language?
No, your motion should have said to include this additional language.
Oh, okay. To include this additional language. I said that,
Now
right?
you will second.
Now I'll second.
Sorry, everyone.
So we have the motion that was in the staff report made that also includes the language provided. which-
I'll read it for the sake of those
Okay, go
listening, so
ahead
it's
and
less
read it,
confusing. The motion to amend the affordable housing language in Section 711(4)(f)(1)(b) to read as follows. The project is predominantly at least 50% residential, and over 30% of units meet the city's affordable housing standard of being affordable to those at or below the percentage of area median income specified in the city's land use incentive grant, known as the Luigi policy, with half of the affordable units accepting rental assistance and housing choice vouchers.
Second.
Okay, so we have one motion.
Yes.
And a second. All right, council, any other questions or comments before we vote?
I just want to say I do appreciate that this talk of the urban forester, and we did budget to hire this person. So maybe we can just, as we always do, check back in with their input. But I think that's a valid point. So.
Okay, we ready? So this again is a roll call vote. It begins with myself. Aye. Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
No.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Okay. All right. The motion passes. That concludes our public hearing agenda. We have one item of new business, and then we have public comment. Do you all want a quick break, or?
No, let's just go.
You want to, okay.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Let's go. We good. We'll eat after. They were here for this.
Okay. Folks, as you exit, we're going to keep going, so. All right, we have our Assistant City Manager, Rachel Wood, who's here to talk to us about a resolution approving the recommendations of allocations of strategic partnership pilot program funding and authorizing the city manager to execute the grant agreements.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council, and thank you. So as the mayor stated this evening, we're going to be discussing the recommendations from the Housing and Community Development Committee to fund a pilot program using strategic partnership funds. So between June 22nd and July 12th, the city opened applications for a pilot grant program that specifically addressed the opportunity gap for low to moderate income school-aged youth with a simplified application process and reporting requirements. We were pleased to have 31 different agencies submit applications as a part of this process. On July 14th, members of the Housing and Community Development Committee, as well as the Evaluation Committee, heard presentations from those applicant agencies. Then on July 19th, the Housing and Community Development Committee reviewed recommendations from the Evaluation Committee and made their final recommendations to fund 9 agencies at a total of $375,500.
Hold on, it's a party out in the hall here. Hold on.
No one wanted to hear my presentation.
I know.
We want to hear it.
They all filed out, yes.
Okay, so this evening, the City Council is being asked to review and consider approval of the Housing and Community Development Committee's funding recommendations, which were approved at the July 19th HCD meeting. Following tonight's presentation, and as a result of lessons learned from the pilot grant program, we will incorporate what we've learned into a larger scale overhaul of the strategic partnership pilot program. And later in this presentation, I'll talk a little bit about that process. So just to restate, the scope of the strategic partnership program for the purposes of this pilot has been narrowed to address the impacts of the opportunity gap by supporting low to moderate income school-aged youth both in and out of the classroom. We've heard feedback from previous iterations of the Strategic Partnership Program that there were some administrative barriers to agencies. So we had a much simpler application form as a part of this process, and we'll be working with agencies on an individual basis to simplify reporting requirements since no federal funding is involved. So as a quick reminder, Strategic Partnership funds are general fund dollars that are set aside each year. We also increased the award minimum to $20,000 per program, and the intent of that really was to maximize the community benefit of the programming, since the intent is to address the opportunity gap. So as I mentioned, strategic partnership dollars are general fund dollars. We currently have $711,000 available because there has been a pause over the last 2 years as staff has been working on retooling this program. So the proposal that was approved by the Housing and Community Development Committee on the 19th recommends funding roughly half of that available fund balance for the pilot program, leaving about $335,000 available for the longer-term overhaul of the program itself. Really quick overview of the timeline. On June 13th, agencies were notified that the application would be coming, and we used several different distribution lists just to ensure that we had as wide of a reach in the community as possible. On June 21st, I made a presentation to the Housing and Community Development Committee regarding our proposal for the pilot grant program. Using the feedback we received at that meeting, the application was advertised on June 22nd. On June 27th, we had a question and answer session with potential applicant agencies, and then July 12th was the application deadline. And again, we were pleased to receive 31 different applications, and the agencies did a really thorough job in the submittals that they provided. On July 14th, we heard presentations from all 31 agencies and the evaluation committee, which consisted of 6 different members, 1 representative from Asheville City Schools, and then 5 city staff members made our recommendations, which were then presented to the Housing and Community Development Committee on July 19th. And then this evening, we're asking City Council to consider those recommendations that were approved by HCD so that we can then begin negotiations and work on the contract awards with the individual agencies receiving funding. So just to reiterate, we did receive 31 applications. Those applications were reviewed based on each program's demonstrated ability to address the opportunity gap for school-aged youth, their ability to track and measure results, the available resources and capacity to carry out the project, and a workable budget to support the program. So I'll really briefly walk through those 9 agencies that are being recommended for funding, and this again is the recommendation that was approved by the Housing and Community Development Committee at their July 19th meeting. Aspire Youth and Family was recommended to receive funding at a level of $20,000 for their vocational skills program. Umoja was recommended at $20,000 for their Hope for the Future program. The Christine Avery Learning Center was recommended for funding at $25,000 for their Village program. One Youth at a Time was recommended for $35,000 in SPF funding. Literacy Together was recommended for $36,000 for their Igniting Superheroes Readers program. YTL's training program was recommended at $50,000, $500. Serve to Lead was recommended at $52,875. Read to Succeed Asheville Buncombe was recommended at $56,125 for their community literacy support program at Eddington. And Western Carolina Rescue Mission, who was serving as the fiscal agent, is being recommended at $80,000 for the Chosen Positive Opportunities Development Success Program, often known as PODS. So that total that I just read out totals up to $375,500 of the available $711,000 that we have in strategic partnership funds. One important note as you're considering making a motion and voting on this evening is given the new state law that has been approved. If any of you sit on the board of any of these agencies, you will need to recuse yourselves from that potential motion. So we're going to take lessons learned as a part of this pilot program, as well as research that staff has been doing over the past roughly year and a half to incorporate that into a longer-term overhaul of the strategic partnership program. So this fall and winter, that program will be further developed and we'll make regular status reports to the Housing and Community Development Committee. This winter, we're hoping to have formal program recommendations implemented with an early spring advertisement of that strategic partnership program. And then we're hopeful that by April, we will actually be able to announce the award of those agencies. So anyone not selected for funding today would have an opportunity in just a few months to apply again once we've completed that longer term, more comprehensive overhaul to the strategic partnership program. So just a quick reminder that the scope was narrowed to focus on school-aged youth and address the opportunity gap. We did receive 31 applications. We heard presentations from those applicant agencies on July 14th. The presentations were made to both the Evaluation Committee as well as the Housing and Community Development Committee. July 19th, the funding recommendations that I previously went through were unanimously approved by the Housing and Community Development Committee to fund 9 agencies at a total of $375,500. This evening, the City Council is being asked to review and consider approval of HCD's recommendations. And then we'll take feedback and lessons learned from this process to inform that longer-term overhaul of the Strategic Partnership Program. And with that, I will answer any questions that you might have.
I couldn't exactly remember. I'm on HCD. Do we have an idea of how many children are being helped?
I have a number. I can read for you. I did have it totaled, and I have it on a spreadsheet, but I don't have it handy. So I know for the Asheville Buncombe program, Read to Succeed, that's about, I can get that number for you. I thought I had it handy, but let me see if I have it on another slide.
Well, while you look for that, I would like to take a moment to thank staff for the incredibly hard and fast work that was done. And I'd also love to thank the Vice Mayor for getting the ball rolling. I will say, as someone who grew up here, I'm especially proud because in our last meeting, I believe that budget that we passed was the most racially equitable budget in Asheville history. And to follow up the very next meeting with this type of targeted work is very pleasing to me. So thank you, and thank you, Vice Mayor, especially.
Thank you. And I do have the number. It's about 800 youth.
See, I knew you do it. That's a big deal.
And thanks to everyone who read the 31 applications.
In a week.
In a week.
Yes.
It was a big lift, and
right.
yes. Thank you to HCD.
Any other questions or comments? I don't have anyone to sign up to speak. Actually, I don't see that it was an option on the list, but nobody signed up to speak under this item. So, any other questions, comments? All right, so if, we'll need a motion to adopt the resolution or to approve the resolution.
I move to approve the recommended allocation for Strategic Partnership Pilot Grant Program funding is shown below, and authorize the city manager to execute the grant agreements.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and we will do a roll call vote. Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
And myself, aye. All right, thank you. All right, we now reach the final stage of the final part of our agenda, which is informal discussion and public comment, and I have a few people signed up to speak. I think 6. Again, you have 3 minutes to speak, and watch the lights on the lectern, and red means stop. So the first person signed up to speak is Stephanie Phillips.
Good evening. Thank you for your service to the community, council members. My name is Stephanie. I'm the daughter of Luther Phillips and granddaughter of Annie Thomas Phillips. All of Western Carolina has been invited to celebrate International World Peace Day on September 21st and strongly encouraged to implement a Citizens Emergency Preparedness Day or raise the standard of the one you currently have in process. On September 12, 2001, my father and I sat in the Forestry Agriculture Department office here in North Carolina as they tried to eminent domain our family farm, which goes back 4 generations. And I was advocating for my family, and I believe the first thing I said was, aren't there more important national security issues that would be requiring your time? We could postpone if you need to. My family goes back 6 generations now. My grandmother also lived and worked in Asheville. According to my family, she was affiliated with the Biltmore Estate and Dr. Grove of the Grove Park Inn. My father's closest associate was Norman Vilsack Frauenheim, an internationally renowned pianist and old enough to be his father. My father stated Mr. Norman's wife's family owned castles in France, which they visited together. Is he referring to the Biltmore Castle? Prior to 18 years old, my local law enforcement told me I was in danger and being targeted. While pregnant with my firstborn, we were assaulted twice, turning me into the equivalent of a surrogate mother. That adopted son became a lawyer and political science degree, working in the nation's capital for Senator Edward Kennedy. There have been numerous documented irregularities regarding me and my family, ranging from misinformation, acts of intimidation, assault, and unlawful arrest. Last week of October 2015, I put on my calendar to research my family records at the local courthouse and genealogical society. The end result was I suffered a home invasion that last week by 2 men in law enforcement uniforms. Attempts to file criminal and civil charges were ignored, most likely because the assailants were employed by other special interest groups such as land developers. I could give other very serious examples, but I won't waste your time. I'm going to fast forward to, in closing, the motivation here seems to be my family is classified under national security. I followed the chain of command and then asked for the politicians to sit down with me and the FBI or CIA officials to discuss these matters and have gotten nowhere. My last request was to separate out my grandmother's and father's generation from mine. Theirs should be declassified by now.
Thank you.
I have no questions I'll be taking at this time. You can, if you have any, direct them to the head of my family household.
Thank you. Next person signed up to speak is Tanner Wilhoit.
Who wants to talk about pickleball after all that?
Okay. There's some more shirts.
I thought it was going to be hard standing here talking to you all, but I am so glad that I'm here and you're standing up there after all that. You guys do a lot of great work. So thank you again for your time this evening. My name is Tanner Wilhoit, and I've been living in the Asheville area for about 10 years now. I'm here representing the numerous pickleball players that are in need of public dedicated courts in and around Asheville. And I know what you're thinking. What is this young, athletic guy doing here to talk about pickleball? Well, pickleball is a sport for everyone. So I've been playing pickleball for about 2 years now, and I'm currently the #2 rated men's singles player in North Carolina and the #3 rated doubles player in the state.
Wow.
I am so grateful to the Asheville pickleball community, which helped me grow, develop, and learn the sport. It is a beautiful and diverse group of people that are extremely welcoming and friendly. The Asheville pickleball community allows people from various backgrounds, cultures, race, religions, ages, genders, social status, athletic background, or no athletic background to come together and have fun, enjoy friendly competition, and enjoy the beautiful outdoors that Asheville is known for. In fact, I believe the ability of pickleball to bring such varied groups of people together is why the sport is so special. You may ask yourself, why should dedicated pickleball courts be one of your top priorities with all the other incredibly important issues and opportunities that you're currently working to help address? I believe it's because of this sport's ability to bring people with differing viewpoints and backgrounds together. That is what Asheville and, quite frankly, the United States needs more of. People coming together to share experiences and have fun. This is also one of the same reasons that Asheville is so special. We all love this city regardless of our differences. All the attributes that make the city of Asheville so special is reflected in the diversity of the Asheville pickleball community. However, just as the city of Asheville is growing, so is the sport of pickleball, both across the country and here in the city. But public facilities, or the lack thereof, is limiting who can participate. I implore you not only to consider, but please prioritize adding dedicated public pickleball facilities in Asheville. While having shared lines on tennis courts may seem like a win-win, it can actually cause issues for both groups, as tennis players and pickleball players try to find court space to play. I neglected to share that I also played college tennis at Monterey College, and I'm a huge tennis fan. I think many tennis players in the Asheville community would also agree that having a separate, dedicated space just for pickleball would help both groups. In closing, please prioritize the creation of public, dedicated pickleball courts here in Asheville. Tourists are looking for places to play, potential residents are looking, and current residents need the courts. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Since we last met pickleball people, the TDA bill passed, and so now there is more room tax money available for projects that cater to both locals and visitors. So I think there's some opportunity there that needs to be realized.
I did see Woodfin got 2 dedicated courts, was it yesterday?
Woodfin.
I know, but hey, nearby. Nearby, it's a start.
Okay. All right.
They're not
The
happy.
next person signed up to speak is Christina DePush.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, city manager, and staff. It's always a great pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. And again, it's always humbling to see your work every evening we come. So good news about pickleball. We are very, very serious in moving toward becoming a nonprofit. It is not finalized yet, but when you talk about the money, the tourist money, we are anxious to get organized, get this official, get this business done, and be a great partner with you and some other, hopefully, agencies and leaders in the community. So we're very excited, and I think I wanted to just personally say on behalf of the pickleball community, we took your consultation to really pursue considering being formalized, and so we really appreciate that, and I think it's important for us to let you know we listened, and we appreciated your advice, so thank you very much. I'm also here tonight on behalf of the pickleball community to thank the wonderful staff of the City of the Recreation Department here in Asheville. We have been talking about having a pickleball league that will start hopefully tomorrow if we don't have afternoon thunderstorms at 5 o'clock. But several of the staff have been a partner with us in setting up. There's going to be a pickleball league starting tomorrow on Wednesdays at 5 o'clock at Oakley. And we would love to have some of your beautiful faces there to come and be with us. But also the Recreation Department offered to buy, and they did buy the balls and the nets for the league. So we are very excited. And, you know, all these little things just give us the hopefulness of a future of what the previous gentleman talked about, of a pickleball community. The other thing that we had spoke about with you and been working with the Recreation Department here in the city is some signs about rules, about just really people learning to be cooperative and in partnership on these sports courts, I believe is how the signs say. The signs are up, and I am just so grateful. The recreation staff, a little group of us meet on a very regular basis to move this vision forward, and 2 of your staff came. They vetted the rules with us. They asked for our information and our feedback. We are just one group that plays on those courts, but we were so grateful, and we really feel a real kindred partnership with the staff from the Recreation Department. So we are very, very excited. So just a couple of other things in regard to pickleball, because this is like, you know, our little world that we talked about. We've had 2 business owners that have taken a great interest in pickleball. Based on our league, and when the league ends later on in August, Rabbit, who's gotten to be quite a name here in Asheville, is going to sort of host our party for us and our celebration, and y'all gonna all receive an invitation, and maybe can come out and play pickleball. Also, they are looking to establish everyday play courts of pickleball on their property. And so that would be a real big commitment. And I think especially for our tourists and our visitors as well as the local folks. Also, the Asheville Sport Club on Cox Avenue has gotten the energy of pickleball, and they are very interested, and you will see some pickleball playing at that facility also. So I think we just wanted to just sometimes come and just say thank you. We appreciate you. And that's it. We're grateful.
Thank you. Jonathan Wainscott.
That was a lady, said lady.
When she said that, I don't believe
Just saw those two. These two.
There we go. That's the beginning. All right, thanks, my lovely assistant, Burleson. My name is Jonathan Wayne Scott. I came across this definition of debunk the other day. Ready? All right. Again, my name is still Jonathan Wayne Scott. I'm sure that you're all familiar with the word debunk. I came across this definition the other day: to expose the pretensions or falseness of, especially by ridicule. It just warmed my heart. I almost wept when I saw this definition, because I consider myself to be quite a debunker, you know? And the origin of the word comes from the root word of bunking, right? And that's bunkum. It's an old word, and it means meaningless political claptrap. And I don't think I've ever heard three words more beautifully arranged than that: meaningless political claptrap, or just nonsense. And it sounds a lot like our own county, because the derivation of the word is actually from here. In 1820, U.S. House Representative Felix Walker, representing Buncombe County, North Carolina, prattled on in a long-winded speech before the United States Congress, supporting the state of Missouri's right to be a slave state. He assured his colleagues that his speech was for his constituency, that he was, in fact, speaking to Buncombe. And his fellow congressmen then picked up the phrase and made it speaking Buncombe, when one of their fellow ding-dongs yapped on and on about meaningless BS. BS stands for Buncombe speak. It's true. All right, so we have Buncombe County, North Carolina, all right, and it's the birthplace of Buncombe. It's the land of Buncombe. We need to be embracing this more. You know, this is our heritage. We can make money off this, you know, trademark it. The county seat of Buncombe County is Asheville, and I think that maybe we should, like, maybe not rename it, but we could just give it a new nickname, like Bunkytown. You know, it was one of my favorite songs when I was growing up. All right. Asheville City Hall, then here in Buncombe County, is the great Temple of Bunk, and I consider myself, I know myself, to be a master debunker, because it's in the dictionary, right? It's in the dictionary, so you can't deny it. And you know that I love coming to city council and just master debunking vigorously for 3 minutes in front of everybody here in the camera. And, you know, it's just what I do. And there was a lot of debunking here tonight, and I applaud all of my fellow master debunkers in the community. And when I leave, this is what I feel like. You know, I'm a bunk raider, and my holy grail was to get the 1931 Jim Crow election system. And then one of these days, I'm going to bust out a receipt, and the walls are going to shake, and the earth is going to quake, and that mural is going to move, and the giant pickleball is going to come and chase me out of the room, you know? And then I'm going to have to, of course, rescue a beautiful woman on the way out. And so then when Maggie and I escape, next time! All right.
Carolina Wayne Scott.
Good luck, pickleball people.
This is too funny.
Okay. Nina Tovish, can you top that?
Nina.
Okay, Nina.
He needs to know there's a Buncombe stove.
Good luck.
Gee, thanks. Timing is everything. I just have a brief request of City Council and of the City Manager. I took note in the documentation for this evening's hearings on the amendment that you've just passed. And I note that at the end of the presentation, or the documentation provided, there was a series of pros and cons, fiscal impact, a number of expected or likely outcomes or concerns. And what I would love to see the city do
is actually have a systemized process for tracking the outcomes of these really vital decisions that city council makes and that city staff are charged with implementing. In other words, a year from now, once this ordinance is now in place, it's been changed, I assume that people who are builders are going to be making decisions based on this new zoning requirement, and I would love to see some data that tracks the outcomes. Do we in fact get more affordable housing? Do we in fact have better stormwater mitigation? Because those were the pros that were listed in this ordinance. This applies to virtually everything. I think that the city would do a huge service to its residents, that every time we pass a new regulation, a new ordinance, that we identify upfront what the purpose of it is and what elements we're going to track to see whether it fulfills the goals that have been established for it. This does a bunch of great things. It helps us keep track of what works and what doesn't. It gives the residents of the city the opportunity to see whether the decision-making resulted in the outcome that was intended. And it allows us to iterate and make modifications early in the process if we see that something is not having the kinds of results that we hope for. So in my imagination, I see a dashboard online that tracks every bit of legislation that comes through City Council, what the expectations for it were, and then a set of city reports that shows whether those expectations were met or not met, what new measurements might be required in order to answer those questions better, because once these programs are in place, new circumstances arise and we might find that we need to measure different variables in order to understand whether it's functioning as intended. Thank you.
And the last person signed up to speak is Donald Warren.
Oh. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Maggie, it's still on the screen there. It's not up there, but it's still on the, yeah.
Before my time starts, I'd like to say I'm in favor of pickleball. I'm actually here to speak to you on a matter of, I'm a resident down in Kenilworth Forest, very close to Tunnel Road, South Tunnel Road, North Tunnel Road, the IHOP and that whole area there. And the drug dealing there has gotten incredible. First thing I'd like to say is Asheville Police Department has been absolutely wonderful in assisting me in trying to alleviate that problem. I was able to speak to IHOP people and removed a lot of vegetation to stop them from dealing drugs to the fence. And these are serious, hard problem drugs. This is fentanyl, meth. I'm a 27-year veteran healthcare provider, 17 years in this community. Most of my care has been with substance abusers. What's happening here is not helping them at all. Homeward Bound is trying to build their facility there to help them, and literally right behind it at 25 White Pine is an apartment complex that fentanyl and meth and other substances are being dealt out of daily. At one point, the traffic was so bad going across the clearing there that it looked like they were doing more business than the cookout window. Asheville PD has been made aware of this. I've brought them there multiple times. They feel their hands are sort of tied, even though we've put in notices for trespassing. None of these people are arrested. They're not taken downtown. They are not forced into a situation where they have to choose other options like treatment. This is a mental health issue. This is a substance abuse issue, but allowing them to constantly keep doing the same thing over again without any kind of consequences is not helping them. It is not therapeutic in any way. And in the meantime, our community is being devastated by it. I was able to speak to the owner of the IHOP, who was telling me how it's destroying his business. Babette's Vignettes is gone, Mattress Firm is gone, that's a different story. The Breaks for Less, their property is broken into, things stolen. A friend of mine who was walking on Tunnel Road was actually asked to get off the property of Breaks for Less because of the homeless problem, because they thought that he might be one. When he explained to him, he's just walking there with his wife, they were apologetic and realized that. But this is the kind of problem that's happening in there. My wife sees a professional, and she will not come into Asheville because when she went to the Red Lobster, there was a knife fight in the parking lot. So, you know, we're trying to do all these things to bring tourists in and to make things nice for it. Hopefully preserve our green spaces and our canopy. I mean, I'm lucky enough to live in Biltmore Forest. It's so unique because they kept all the trees, and that's what makes it different than the regular Kenilworth. But I know my time is up.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
But I would, you know, I wanted to make this official so that somebody could look into the drug dealing at 25 Lake Line.
Okay, thank you. Council, that concludes our agenda and all the folks that have signed up to speak.
I have something I would like to acknowledge in front of full council. It's been heavy on my heart, but not commonly spoken of during a full council meeting. It is that we have suffered our 11th homicide, and our community is in a repeated cycle of grief. And I think we need to, as a council, have serious conversations beyond Public Safety Committee about what violence interruption looks like. During our last meeting, public safety meeting, we did have a discussion about what violence interruption could look like, and community members have pressed the issue about having autonomy from APD, but alignment with APD. That makes sense for me because we're in the process of building trust so that we can work more collaboratively. But in the process, I mean, our young people are suffering a lot. So Marcus just left a few minutes ago, but we did have a discussion during the last public safety meeting about utilizing the equity department to try to figure out what a process to that end would look like. Autonomy, but alignment with APD so that we can get the ball rolling. There are community groups organizing, primarily mothers who have suffered the loss of their sons. And they're planning marches and they're planning to have grief sessions. But I feel like it's our responsibility, especially the mothers on council, to help organize a violence interruption program. The county is already doing some work, putting some money into that area, but I think it would mean a lot for us to aid an effort towards violence within the city limits and work collaboratively with Housing Authority to see what extra measures they can go about to provide safety for their residents. On another note, that's that piece. On another note, there was a conversation had not too long ago with one of the principals of Asheville City Schools. And like every city and county, they're suffering from a massive bus shortage. And I remember in my youth catching a city bus to school. So I wonder what that partnership looks like and if that can be a stopgap while they find bus drivers. Yeah, and that's the thing. I know there was a plan in place. I know there were bus tickets given out. I don't know what that partnership looks like. We might have to dust off those plans because it was maybe in the early 90s that that plan was in place, but they're very desperate.
I thought you were going to say your seniors in your school drove the bus because that was
no.
way. That's how it used to be,
Yeah.
but that's probably you're too young. But that's how, because that's another solution. But.
So we will definitely have that conversation internally, but as you well know, we are having the same problem, the same challenge of getting bus drivers. And in fact, unfortunately,
the routes overlapped.
True, absolutely.
Especially the south side, the communities that are really close to Asheville High and Asheville Middle Schools. I think those are very frequent routes. And those routes were covered, from my memory, but I don't know if other routes were also.
Yeah, I just definitely will look into it. I guess my biggest concern is the consistency of the timing of our routes. You know, when pick up and when kids need to be back home. But we'll certainly look at that.
Just to the
To your-
vice
well,
mayor's.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
to your first point, and I was actually talking with the city manager before the council meeting about the same thing in terms of, there's a lot of internal discussion happening and a lot of work at public safety, but we haven't elevated that to council, and I think that's very important for us to bring it on a community level, to have that conversation. You know, what is the role of the city? What is the city doing? What can the community do? What approach, and also the partnership with the Housing Authority. They're struggling. Apparently they're looking for their own independent security, and they're not able to do that. So, we have a lot of moving parts to it, but we don't meet again until the fourth Tuesday in August. But Ms. Campbell, maybe we can bring something forward to council to talk about.
And we're talking about it amongst ourselves, and we're having meetings about it. So it's not that, we don't care, and we're not also impacted. But when we don't make it public, when we don't discuss it here, it feels as if either we're desensitized or we don't care. And I think if we don't start talking about it, then we will become, not me personally, but as a community, we become desensitized.
And I know personally, I'm not able to always catch the public safety meetings because of conflicts, and I'm trying to go back and watch and stuff, but I don't find that I'm as informed, and it concerns me. So anything that we could do to bring it to a council level, I think would be appreciated.
Absolutely. We will do that. We will follow up, Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Happy belated birthday, Esther.
Thank you. Thanks. All right, we are adjourned.